Well, another win in the country is Nigeria's gross domestic product, which grew by 5.01% year on year in the second quarter of this year. This marks 3 consecutive quarters of growth, following the negative growth rate recorded in the second and the third quarters of 2020. This is a leap because the last time we had it was 0.51. That's the first quarter of 2021. Analysts have said that this is just an indication of return of business activities after the restrictions to curb COVID-19. What is the government saying? We have Ajuri Ngilali, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, to tell us what the government is saying about this. Hello, Ajuri. Good to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning to you. It's really a privilege to be with you.
Yeah. So I guess congratulations are in order. The economy has grown by 5.01 from one quarter to the other, 0.51 to 5.01, the strongest since 2014. But analysts are saying we shouldn't just, get too happy because it's just a rebound from the COVID-19 restrictions.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, we're quite proud of the results, of course. We're happy that Nigeria is on the kind of trajectory that all of us would want in terms of the direction in which the economy is headed. But by no means are we spending our time, patting ourselves on the back and dancing. We recognize that not all is yet uhuru. There's still a lot of work to be done. But I think one of the areas where we really want to dig into kind of the data and the content of the latest GDP report is really the fact that the report itself assessed that for the first time in a very long time, that we are now moving towards what is truly an inclusive economy. Most of the data clearly suggests that right now we have a scenario in which our growth in the services sector, which we all know is labor intensive, has grown to the extent of nearly double digits, about 9.2%, the highest since 2010, the highest in more than a decade. That's very encouraging. When you look at the fact that the non-oil sector contributed about 6.7% to GDP, that is the highest rate of non-oil sector contribution to the GDP since the third quarter of 2014. So we are making a lot of progress. And I don't think that it would be quite accurate to suggest that the recovery is simply kind of a natural reaction of reopening the economy. If it was, I don't think we would be seeing growth rates that have not been seen since 2010 and 2014, for example. I think that's part of it, certainly. But then obviously, there's no doubt that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has put in place verifiable and measurable measures to inject further life into the economy. You may recall that we put in place the 2.3 trillion naira economic sustainability plan, overseen and implementation by His Excellency the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. And that was really a multi-sectoral intervention across the power sector, the work sector, agriculture, housing, and the like, social investment, MSME capitalization, that really ensured that we are empowering Nigerian-owned businesses who employ Nigerian-owned labor, who will use indigenous Nigerian raw materials for the construction of houses, roads, and other elements across the economy. And we've now seen the effect of that when we've looked now at these GDP numbers.
All right, the federal government believes economic sustainability plan has the credits for this growth. So where are the benefits from this plan? Where can we see them?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, some of it you would see separate from kind of the notion of how bad would things have been if the economic sustainability plan had not been in place. So, for example, when you're in a recession and you're battling out of it, and you know that you have hundreds of thousands of MSMEs across the nation who are on the precipice of sacking their workers because they simply could not afford to pay salaries at a time when the economy was essentially shut down, not to speak of the global supply chains being shut down at a certain point. So government's intervention through the economic sustainability plan, part of it was the survival fund, where we were able to verifiably and measurably save 1.3 million jobs across 500,000 MSMEs in all states of the Federation, across all local government areas of the Federation. So when you look at it, you may not necessarily tag all of that, job growth, but what you've done is
okay, I think we lost Ajuri there due to network, and I'm sure we will get him back. And, it's an interesting question you asked him, about where are these?
See these,
Yeah, because this is a conversation that's really going around. Even if you watched our politics today last night, when Sheung had a conversation with the former DG of LCCI, these are some of the things that Nigerians are asking, that we are seeing these figures, but we would like, we're hearing the figures. We would like to see and feel the figures and see it in our lives, and these are some of the questions that Nigerians actually are asking the government.
Not just figures.
Exactly. I think we have Ajuri back. Ajuri, are you back?
Yes, I am back indeed. Thank you very much, and sorry about the postponement there.
All right. So do you want to pick up?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much. So to the point you were making during the interregnum that, Nigerians want to feel the jobs, I wanted to mention the fact that we've been able to save jobs that would have been lost before I go into the new jobs. So in terms of the new jobs, what you're looking at, of course, it's no secret that we put in place the National Special Public Works Program, in which we put 774,000 young people, young Nigerians, to work across all 774,000 local government areas of the Federation, 1,000 from every local government, reconstructing rural roads across the nation. We've already successfully linked 500 markets across the country through this, Special Public Works Program under the umbrella of the Economic Sustainability Plan. So you're having impact there. And then in addition, because the Economic Sustainability Plan was fundamentally and intentionally built to maximize the multiplying economic impact across multiple sectors of the economy, all of the goods that we use to reconstruct rural roads, we sourced our bitumen locally. So none of the materials we used were imported, for example, ensuring that vendors across the nation in all of the various local governments are being patronized directly by the federal government of Nigeria. This is extremely important. So you have that new set of jobs. Then in addition to that, we've been able to also support, MSMEs with new capital so that they can actually expand their existing operations. If you look at the program that we put in place, for example, for exporters, the Export Expansion Program, where we're providing grants. These are not loans. This is not just like the Survival Fund. They don't have to pay it back. Grants to exporters to essentially expand their existing operations, employ more Nigerians within their MSMEs, while also expanding the nation's stock of exports to other countries across goods and value chains, from cocoa to finished products like chocolate, vegetable oil, plantain chips, so many different items. So there are so many different interventions that we brought to bear under the Economic Sustainability Plan, and even outside of the Economic Sustainability Plan, where these are actual jobs paying for the uplift of several families across the nation, school fees, and all of the other things that are involved. And I have not even mentioned construction. If you look around this country right now, external to the Economic Sustainability Plan, you have mega projects everywhere. There in the Southwest, of course, it's no secret. I'm sorry.
So one of the things I think that will help Nigerians to understand and, flow along with this administration would be if they saw these things in pictures. Because even as we have this conversation, yes, people are watching and they're like, oh, we hear that and we hear this all the time. Where are they? So perhaps, Ajuri, you know about broadcasting. You should get this thing in pictures and let people see. But other than that, there's also the issue of ease of doing business. And some time ago, we spoke to manufacturers, and they said they do feel that the government is making efforts in the issue of ease of doing business. But when it comes to reducing cost of production, the issue of multiple taxation it is still an area that seems the government hasn't done much. So if you want to save jobs, obviously the manufacturers need to feel the impact of ease of doing business.
Thank you very much. So to the initial observation you raised concerning the need for pictures, for example, before the incident took place with Twitter, I've been very active on social media, particularly Twitter, Facebook, and others. We were very, very, diligent about making sure that all of the various projects that we're engaged in, that we are sending almost monthly or weekly, in some cases, updates of the projects from one stage of development to another. The 44 Sukuk roads on my Twitter account, for example, and I'm sure the relationship between the Nigerian Federation and Twitter will soon be restored. You would have seen all of the pictures, the level of completion, even the economic data around how much was paid to the contractors. We've been very transparent about all of that, and we will continue to be. I think when we talk about ease of business, there are a few aspects of this that are important to note. If we're referring to multiple taxation, it's also important for us to recognize that multiple taxation involves multiple tiers of government. And so the federal government can do a lot in terms of streamlining taxation, making it easier for people to pay their taxes, and all of that, and also cutting undue tax liabilities on companies. And we can go into measures that we've put in place along that line. But in so doing, we should also mention the fact that when we talk about multiple taxation on companies, where the shoe is really pinching the foot of these MSMEs and even some of these large corporations is really the role that state and local governments are playing in terms of, levying several taxes that many of these corporations feel are excessive due to the fact that, many of their operations are at a certain level of government, in their opinion. So that's a major issue. So what we have done to answer your question around solutions on the multiple taxation issue is, under the leadership of His Excellency the Vice President, the National Economic Council had convened the 36 state governors, and already we've come to an advanced place in terms of getting the state governors on the same page with the federal administration around how we can all effectively streamline tax administration in such a way that, look, we have to recognize any factory or industry that wants to come into a state is good for not just the state, but for the federal government. So that new tax revenue and that investment should not be hindered by excessive taxation on the part of state and local governments. And we're working with them on that.
All right. All right, Ajuri, we'll just ask you to hold on a bit. We need to go on a break. When we come back, we have more to talk to you about, especially when it has to do with the GDP. So please do hold on. We'll see you shortly after the break.
Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning. We still have Mr. Ajuri Igalale, SSA to the President on Public Affairs, still here talking about assessing Nigeria's Q2 2021 GDP. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so the average growth in the first half of 2021 is now 2.70%, and this implies that the Nigerian economy will need to grow at an average of 2.5% in the second half of the year to achieve a target growth of 2.5 to about 3% for 2021. What's the plan to sustain this trajectory?
A phenomenal question. Thank you very much. So really moving forward, we have to be very aggressive about the implementation of the most recent movements. One of the that we really started driving, and I want to be very precise about this. If you look at the numbers, you find that where historically, and this is why I was earlier referring to the fact that you're seeing growth where we want the growth to be, which are the labor-intensive sectors, such as the services sector, the real sector, and the like, and where we had actually seen a little bit of dip, interestingly, was in the oil and gas sector, where, of course, the oil and gas sector is well known to be capital intensive, yes, but labor intensive, not so much. It's quite non-intensive. So what we have done now is moving forward. You referred to the NNPC's movement into profit. 2018, NNPC reported a loss deficit of 803 billion naira. In 2019, that deficit was bridged down to about approximately 1.7 billion naira. And then, of course, we've just reported the first total profit of 287 billion naira, the first time in 44 years, as you said. Now, the reason why I raise that is because moving forward now, what have we just done? We've just, the President Muhammadu Buhari has assented to the Petroleum Industry Act. Right now, as we speak, we have OPEC curbs in place that limit our production to about 1.6 million barrels per day. We have production capacity in this country, oil production capacity of 2.3 million barrels per day. The OPEC curbs are expected to expire in the early part of next year, meaning we should return to normal output. That is going to be a major boon to our revenues. That's number one. Number two, one of the most underreported aspects of the Petroleum Industry Act being assented to by Mr. President is the fact that we have about 8 deep offshore oil mining fields with productive capacity of about 875,000 barrels per day, which would take us above the 3 million barrels per day production benchmark as a nation when fully produced. What is now happening is those international oil companies have done everything in joint venture with the NNPC to basically say, look, we've done the feasibility, we know what is there, but we don't want to begin production until we see the final content of the Petroleum Industry Act, which is why it was within the wisdom of Mr. President to say, look, this is going to be compiled with a consultative process with the IOCs at the table, traditional leaders from the Niger Delta at the table, the legislators at the table, and the executive branch at the table to make sure that it's a win-win document, not unduly favoring one group over the other. Now, the point here is that when this new production comes on stream, because now that the PIA is assented to, the international oil companies in these 8 deep offshore projects, specifically Bonga Southwest and Aporo, Bonga North, Bosi 1 and 2, you have Zaba Zaba, you have Uge Field. These are the fields that we're about to get into now with the IOCs. Once they begin production, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars of new revenue to the Federation to be shared across all tiers down across the 774 local government areas.
Ajiri, when you talk about oil and all that, I mean, this is a whole lot, is another line of conversation because, I mean, I'm sure you're following the MTEF meetings and there we realize we don't even know our daily consumption. I mean, we were talking of crude theft and the GMD of NNPC said, we don't even know how to solve that. So even though you're mentioning these potentials, I think when you look at the reality, you find out that we also have a lot of hindrances that would not easily bring these things to come to pass. You have crude theft. I mean, you have a lot of things going on there. So even though these things sound very laudable, you know, when you come to the reality of it. But, I mean, we're not talking about NNPC and all that. We're talking of the GDP and, you know, the basic economy. So now there's also another issue of inflation. We've had inflation tapering for a 4th consecutive time now in July to 17.38. Always beating economists and analysts' expectation. And so much so that a lot of people are beginning to question. I mean, we see these inflation figures. It doesn't really match what we are seeing. And people are asking, okay, one of the economists we spoke to said the NBS, I beg your pardon, need to repackage their basket of commodities which they use, you know, to measure inflation. So I don't know if you have thought along this line or if you have heard conversations along this line of people kind of questioning, you know, these inflation figures.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would be remiss not to respond to the initial observation you made. I must respond to that. I think before I go into your next question, the question that my brother asked me was, how do we sustain the growth moving forward? That's what he asked me. So what I was saying was that we had essentially achieved 5% GDP growth in the second quarter with a dip in oil and gas from the sector. And what I am now explaining is that with the PIA assent and with the reforms within the NNPC, right, which are verifiable for everybody to see, what we are now going to have are dramatically enhanced revenues, meaning that the share of oil and gas to GDP over the next several quarters will be much improved over what it is now, meaning that the growth that we're recording in the non-oil sector will now be accompanied by massive growth in the oil and gas sector, meaning that the growth will be sustainable. That's why I mentioned all of that. And the last point on your observation is that the Petroleum Industry Act goes to address several of the elements that you mentioned. Pipeline vandalism and infrastructural compromise, for example, has been addressed. That's why we put in place approximately between $500 million to $1 billion, depending on the expenditure in the sector every year for host communities, with the condition that any host community that compromises their infrastructure will have the repairs of that infrastructure deducted from their host community trust allocation. So we've addressed those issues in collaboration with stakeholders in the Niger Delta. So we believe that the issues you referenced will be things of the past now that this act has been assented to. But to the other issue you've now raised about inflation, first and foremost, the inflation figures, we are quite, of course, optimistic about the fact that we've seen 4 consecutive months of reduction in inflation. But there's really no doubt that the overall, tabulation and collection of data in the country it requires further reform. We understand that. For example, when the NBS, for example, tabulates unemployment data in the country, and of course, all of us cite unemployment data in the country generally, it's now well known that you have millions of informal MSMEs across the nation who are being tabulated or reported as unemployed, meaning that they are tabulated and reported as under the poverty line, when in many cases, not only are they above the poverty line, but they're actually employing other Nigerians who are above the poverty line. But because they are not formally integrated into the formal economy, they're not counting in the unemployment figure. So there are quite a number of reforms that have to be undertaken in terms of how we collect and manage the nation's economic statistics. But be that as it may, we recognize that we've made some progress. We're not dancing and celebrating yet. There's a lot more work to do, but there's no doubt about the fact that we are on a very positive trajectory moving forward.
All right, Mr. Jurie Igalale, thank you so much for your time on Business Morning. Senior Special Advisor to the President on Public Affairs. It was great having you on Business Morning. Thank you so much.
Truly a privilege to be with you. Thank you so much.